talk today is State of Future Play for the Australian Economy, Productivity and the Role of AI. Dr. Rivers is Director, Chief Economist of Rivers Economic Consulting, with a solid knowledge and experience in undertaking complex economic and policy analysis in over 60 projects in the last 2 decades. We worked with Tim Harding on a wide range of projects. George has extensive experience in program evaluations as well as extensive experience in regulatory reform, including stakeholder consultation, cost-benefit analysis, competition assessments, activity-based costing and training workshops. He was also a council member of the Economic Society of Australia and an academic at Monash University for 30 years. Dr. Rivers has served as Associate Dean of Industry Research at Monash University and was a faculty member with the Australia-New Zealand School of Government, instructing senior public sector officials in various state and federal government jurisdictions. George is currently serving as an adjunct associate professor with the Department of Economics at Monash University. I have pleasure in introducing George.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Derek. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming along to my talk today. It's a very interesting time at the moment because the talk I intended to give got turned on its head a couple of weeks ago, and things are changing sort of by the minute. If I said by the hour, that would be too simple. So I'll do my best today to talk about trends in inflation and growth and AI and the role of AI in productivity and how it all kind of works. And I'll try to give some sort of side reference to what's going on at the moment as well, because that's going to be significant in terms of what occurs in the future. I don't have a crystal ball and I cannot tell you the future. No economist can, but we can have a look at the insights into what's going on at the moment and sort of get an understanding of what's probable or likely to occur, at least for this year. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is what makes Australia's economy tick. So when we look at Australia's economy, how does it actually work? If we're going to say something about where it's going, how does it actually work? There are two sides to it. There's a demand side and there's a supply side to the economy. Okay, so this is the macro economy. The value of the economy in 2025 was US dollars $1.83 trillion. So $1.83 trillion is the value of the economy in 2025. However, putting this into perspective, our future fund right now is worth much more than that. So the availability of wealth that there is in the future fund is a lot more considerable than the entire GDP of Australia. And there's been discussions, and I've had discussions with superannuation leaders in terms of is there potential to use that fund in a certain way? Just putting it out there. Anyway, we'll come back to that. All right, so economic growth, 2.1%. And if you have a look at GDP growth here, is this a pointer? Oh, fantastic. 4% is what you want your economy to be at. 4% will give you sort of natural unemployment rate or natural or long-term growth that's steady. So 2.1, as an economist, is abysmal. So 2.1% is terrible, and I think a lot of people are talking up about the fact that Australia's economy is strong and growing and blah, blah, blah. It's not. During the GFC, Germany was heralded as a leader in the economy during the GFC and was barely able to manage less than 1% growth. You've got to have around 4% growth to have a steady economy, and we're below that. And we're about to kill the economy even more. This is what's interesting. So what are the ramifications of that? And as you can see here, in terms of the past, we've had sort of 4% growth quite a bit in between 1995, 2001, going to 2007. And there is business cycles, of course, but those cycles always take us to around 4%. We had extensive growth of nearly 9% during coming out of COVID, but that was an anomaly, and that doesn't happen normally. All right, so demand side, supply side, and I want to talk about these aspects of the economy because these aspects of the economy are what's going to drive the economy. It's what's going to drive this growth. And importantly, why is growth even important? Why do we need GDP to grow? And the answer is because we obtain income from that. That's where we get our income from. So our per capita income, as GDP is growing, our income is growing as a society. So it's important to keep that at a reasonable growth level. Okay, so higher output of goods and services in the economy translates into higher income per capita, as I said, and this happens from the circular flow of income expenditure. You get income as a worker, you supply your worker hours, then you spend money, and then that creates money which pays for income, then you supply more work, create goods, expenditure, income, and so forth and so forth and so forth. There's leakages in this circular flow. The main leakages are taxation, when the government says, give me some of that, I want some of that action. And the other leakage, of course, is imports, when that income, part of that income expenditure bubble, goes overseas and pays for someone else's 21st birthday or whatever they might want to do. Okay, so where does the income go? Well, I had a look at this, and it's quite interesting. Health and education is the big winner. This is the sector you want to be in terms of income, followed by finance, mining, and of course manufacturing, construction at the lower end. And this is 3rd February 2026. So I'm trying to give you the most recent. So you want to be in health, you want to be in education. That's sort of where the big money is in terms of the economy. So if you're interested in going into sectors in terms of investments, these are this is the area. Health and education is a big one. Consumption. So what I want to do now, first of all, is I want to talk about the demand side. So I want to talk about consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Those 4 components of the demand side of the economy. What's been happening with those, and what's likely to happen with these aspects? So we talk about an economy that's being driven by demand, driven by consumption, investment, government spending, net exports. Is it or is it not? What's actually driving the economy? And this is what I want to talk to you about now. This is the first part. So consumption. It is about 50% of GDP. As you can see, it is quite stable. It hovers around sort of the 5% growth aspect. It's quite a stable element of the economy. So they do talk about consumer sentiment quite a bit in the news. What's happening with consumer sentiment? It tends to be quite stable. It's got a little bit of up, a little bit of down. It's a major component of GDP, but it is quite stable. We are looking at smaller growth in consumption, and that's going to be due to global concerns and higher interest rates. So we're going to have high interest rates, and that will affect consumption to a small amount. And that's one aspect of expenditure that the RBA will be targeting. But is this a major driver in the economy? Is it a major player in terms of changes? That's yet to be. The savings ratio, as you can see, went up immensely during COVID, but our savings ratio is around 8% of our income. We will save something of that nature as well. And then again, quite stable. Went down in 2001, 2007. There was a lot of debt being acquired by households. They were pushing the limit in terms of if I have a house and get a bit of equity in that house, I can borrow more money and buy another house and get a bit of equity in that, and then buy another house and get a bit of equity in that. Before you know it, I've got 7, 8 properties, and then that kind of exciting thing happened, and negative gearing and all of this business. So that was 2001, 2007. Household saving to income rose from 6.9 to 6.1. So it's rose to 6.9 from 6.1. So I said it's around around the 8%. It's around 6.9 at the moment, 7. It's fairly stable. Household debt as a share of income, 176%. That's nothing to be sneezed at, and that's a bit of a concern because when incomes take a tumble, you have to be able to service that debt and service that commitment, and this is where households feel the pinch. So what about investment? Well, investment counts for 12% of GDP, but here's the point. What investment? Business investment has taken a tumble. As you can see in this graph, it's at low levels. It's gone from above 18% to 12%. This is investment in machinery, infrastructure, equipment, transportation equipment, all this stuff, down. The capital stock, so the total value of fixed assets, machinery, equipment, buildings, necessary for productivity, and we'll talk about this in a minute, all of that is going down. So when we talk about investment, business investment, that is dropping significantly. The implication of this is we have supply side constraints. And I'll talk about the supply side of the economy in a minute and productivity, but we have supply side constraints, which means that we're struggling as an economy to get enough equipment, to get enough machinery, and that's feeding through inflation. So if we want to know where inflation's coming from, this is one of the key aspects of inflation. Not what you're hearing on TV, not what you're seeing in the news. This is the hidden culprit of inflation. We don't have enough machinery, don't have enough equipment, don't have enough infrastructure. And that's a problem. It's not that we have less, we actually have more, but the growth isn't enough to sustain a growing economy. Going from, when I was a uni student, 14 million, to now what, 28 million, in less than half a generation. But don't worry, because investment in dwellings continues to be sky high. So we live off building houses. That's what we're living off. That's what the economy is depending on. And this is why when they talk about interest rates, everybody shakes and shudders, because what's going to happen to this growth? Because we know that this one is hopeless. This aspect of investment is hopeless. That's all we've got left. That's all we have. Consumption is steady. It's always steady. Goes up a little bit, goes up. But this is the one that moves quite a bit. You can see here, household wealth, 915% as a share of income. Current household debt to assets is 16.1, and the lowest level since 1997. And this is because we have an accumulation of super, we have higher housing prices, and so these properties are worth more. So as a share, it's dropping. But does that mean we're managing our debt better? And this is an interesting point. If we look at global household debt to income ratios, Australia is right off the charts. That's the red line, the highest. So are we managing our debt? Absolutely no, we're not. We have a lot of asset wealth, which is fine because prices keep going up, but our debt is out of control. Credit card debt is sitting around the $43 billion at the moment, with about 21 billion of charges. So that's just to give you a snapshot. Current household debt to annual disposable income is 176.1%. So my debt right now, as an average Australian, is 176% of my annual income, disposable income. So I wanted to show you these statistics because they harp on about how amazing it is debt to asset. Debt to asset, fantastic, but when you look at debt to income, not so fantastic at all. In fact, the worst it's ever been. And homes are not a liquid asset, and this is the problem. You build your wealth in your home, but it's not a liquid asset. If you need funds, if you need expenditures, you can't access it quickly. That's the problem. So we have a cash liquidity poor society right now, a very cash liquidity poor society that's relying on credit cards in order to sustain spending with their wealth tied up in assets like homes and properties. Government spending is 27% of GDP, and an increase by 3.3% in 2025. And you can see here the percentage growth has changed. It dipped in 2022, December 2022, but it's always in the positive and it's always growing, and government spending is of course, being 27% of GDP, is an important driver of the economy, and it has significant impacts on the economy. Before I talk about the spending and where it's going and what government spending is doing for the Australian economy, I want to talk about tax revenue. And you'll see here that we had a 48.9% increase in tax revenue since 2018-19. It's nearly 50% increase in tax revenue. The government is making money. It's making serious money. I'm not making money. The government is making money. It's doing that through heavy taxation. Heavy taxation. Where does the spending go? Like I said, social security and welfare, health and education. These are the three big spenders. So where government is spending money is the sector of the economy that gets most of the income from GDP. So that stands to reason that that's where they're investing. I want to go back to this slide. $833.6 billion of taxes. Now, to put that in perspective, I said that it was 1.8 trillion was the value of GDP in US dollars, but this is $833.6 billion, so it's a lot of revenue. Question is, this is 531 billion in total. Where's the rest? Where's the other 300 billion? Okay, so what's happened to the spending on the public service? This is an interesting one. We have $199.7 billion spent on bureaucrats, growing bureaucrats. We need more bureaucrats. In fact, that's what our education system is designed for. We send all those kiddies out to school there to learn basic arithmetic and writing and skills so they can be bureaucrats. Yeah, this is what right out of the 1800s. 1800s, 18th century education for 18th century style economy. So growing the state and local government. 46.6% increase since 2018-19. So just to put that into perspective. And you won't read about this, you won't see this discussed as much in these terms, so I just thought I'd give you some interesting numbers. And these are all sourced from the RBA, from the ABS, Australian Bureau of Statistics. It's all out there for everyone to see, but people don't see it, they're not aware. What about welfare spending? Well, age pension spending, we have 56.8 billion in 2019-20. In 24-25, 62.3 billion in age pension spending. Even though the population of 65 and over has increased, we've got a modest increase. More people having to be reliant on super to finance their retirement. I was there at a speech by Bill Kelty. Does everyone remember Bill Kelty? And he was like, he slammed on the podium and he said, I've seen, me and Bob Hawke, we single-handedly saved the Australian economy by introducing mandatory super. And what they were saying basically was, we're not going to have enough to pay for everyone's pension because we're going to be too busy growing the public service. So what we need is something called superannuation. That'll work. And in some ways it has, and there's a lot of money there. Family tax benefit, 37.4 billion down to 32.5 billion. We've got more people, but we're giving them less. We're not going to hand out as much benefits. Yes, times are tough. Tighten your belts. That's kind of the story there, which is very interesting. Government debt. So, total, this is going up to percentage of GDP, projected to be around 45% of GDP. So, imagine that $1.83 trillion, 45% of that is debt. Now, just a quick anecdote. I remember I was sitting in a class in macroeconomics, and I had a professor of ours, went to Eton School, very everyone accused of being very spoiled, and our debt was around 300 billion. And he said, if we keep going the way we're going, we're going to have a bunch of Austrian economists come into the country, sack the government, and run the country, and there goes our national sovereignty. And that was the kind of discussion that we had. Professor Richardson, his name was actually. So, and I look at these numbers, and that number pales compared to what we've done recently. And no one's sort of batting an eyelid. I'm just looking, are there any Austrian economists coming for us? I don't know. I don't know. The problem is debt bad? Absolutely not. I have some debt. And if I'm investing, using that to invest in a lemonade stand, fantastic, because that's going to generate future income for me. The problem is if I'm just investing it in lemons, just buying lemons. So I'm using the analogy here. I'm not putting my money into a lemonade stand, I'm just buying lemons. So there's no potential capacity to generate future income. That's where government debt needs to go. If you can generate future income, go for your life. Have 45% of GDP. Have 60% of GDP. If you're building infrastructure and ports and everything that's going to allow and crowd in private sector investment, go for your life. No problem. But that's not where the money is being spent. Growing the public sector is not going to generate future income. It is going to create more jobs, but it's not going to grow income. What about net exports? Net exports are falling. This is coal, gas services. Ironically, given that there's no gas coming through the Strait of Hormuz, and what 20-25% of the natural gas on the planet comes through that strait as well, not just the oil. Interestingly, and Australia is the second largest exporter of gas in the world, we're going to make a killing. Not Australian households, but net, as a sector, we're going to make a killing. Australia's going to make a killing. Not mums and dads, though. They're going to suffer. Because why sell your gas here when you can send it overseas? So, and that's you know, for every export industry, that's the way it is. If we didn't export wine, our wine would be much cheaper here. If we didn't export gas, it would be much cheaper here. But it is the way it is. So in terms of that graph, that might be a little bit old, a little bit incorrect. We could see net exports rising. Now, there was some discussion that as the economies around the world go into recession and global constraints, that their demand on gas is going to fall, so that will actually hurt our exports. It'll offset any price increase in natural gas that we've got at the moment. But I don't think that's the case, because the demand for oil, demand for gas, demand for all of these things is very insensitive to prices. It's insensitive, inelastic. We need to power things with gas, electricity. I've got a gas stove at home. I can't just use, I don't know, water to power it. I've got to use gas. I have to cook my food. So there's limits to how much reduction in gas trade there will be. People are insensitive, at least in the short run. People do switch to technologies over time, but in the short run, they're price insensitive when it comes to oil, gas, and all of these things. I don't see everyone running out to buy an electric car just yet, and I'll come to oil prices. Okay, so productivity. I want to talk about productivity, and I'll come back to productivity when I talk about AI later on as well. But productivity is important because it talks to the supply side of the market. And how much bang do I get for my buck? That's what productivity is. So how much GDP am I getting for my labor stock or labor hours? That's labor productivity. GDP per capital stock, that's capital productivity. Or we could talk about GDP for all capital and labor stock, total factor productivity. So when we talk about productivity, which productivity? They talk about productivity all the time. But what are they talking about? Labor productivity, capital productivity, total factor productivity. Completely different things. And so these are one of the misnomers as well that people sort of fail to pick up, or nuances. There's a big difference between these sorts of productivity. Okay, so why is productivity important? Because, as I said before, it's one of the things that drives the supply side, that drives the economy. So it's not just demand that drives the economy, it's supply. During the Great Depression, there was a big mistake that said supply creates its own demand. Don't worry about it. and then the Great Depression happened. So yes, you do need demand to buy your goods and services, but you need to produce those goods and services as well, and that's created by capital stock and by labor stock. By capital stock, I mean all capital, equipment, machinery, natural resource. It's a very generic term that we use in economics when we mention capital. We lump everything in there, pretty much. And like I said here earlier, our business investment is low as a percentage. Our growth is low, as a percentage of GDP is low, and therefore our capital is significantly under pressure, our capital stock, significantly under pressure right now. So productivity, so how's it looking for labor and capital? So as you can see, our net capital stock, annual growth, the purple one on the top, that is falling. So here we have a decline in the capital stock. That's bad if you want to produce things, because you need capital and you need labor. Growth will be constrained as affordability constraints and high borrowing costs influence this market. There'll be a capital slowdown, difficulty in accessing refinancing for a lot of companies, a lot of agricultural businesses. Refinancing will be a problem. Getting extra equipment will be a problem. Even maintaining the debt on their current equipment will be a problem. So slowdown in the growth of capital stock. What about workers? Well, the working age population, that'll be determined by net overseas migration policy and less by natural natural increase in population resource over time. So we're having fewer kids and we're requiring more and more migration to sustain labor. Haven't got enough capital, labor is struggling, we need to bring, we need people, we need equipment, we need to bring that in from somewhere. If you have a look at that bottom orange line, the working age population, you'll see that orange line almost, since 79-80, almost perfectly coincides with the immigration chart, which is this one. So that exact trend, that exact growth and change of labor stock from overseas, it's almost net overseas migration, almost one for one. We're just not having enough kids. And I know one of our former treasurers said, hey, have one for mum, one for dad, one for Australia, but we're just not doing it. It's too expensive. I talked to Gen Z, I have a chat with them, they said, we're not going to have kids. Life is too expensive. Our debt is too high. A lot of these students coming out of universities already with immense amounts of debts right out of uni and whatnot. So population, natural increase in population is a tricky thing. Okay, what about inflation? Well, inflation, apart from coming out of COVID, as you can see, we talked about coming out of COVID, inflation. During COVID, savings rate dipped. People were just spending on everything, and that's when consumption really did go for a heavy push. 50% of GDP, and subsequently we had quite a bit of inflation, but a lot of that inflation was driven by government spending, handouts. Here you go. If you're a medium business, whatever it is, here's some money. Whether or not you're earning that sort of money normally or not, here's money anyway, and that sort of thing. And so we get those spikes in inflation. During the GFC, we had the Australian government was basically had the educational revolution. Does everyone remember the education revolution? Mm-hmm. They went into every classroom, whether they had a computer or not, got rid of the computers and gave them new computers. That was the education revolution. Here, have another laptop. But we just bought these. No, don't worry, have another one. And this was during the GFC. So during times of COVID, GFC, you'll see the government trying to just, basically pump prime the economy, just throwing money out there however it can. But generally speaking, inflation is pretty much steady. Since 1990, it's been sort of between that band of 0 to 5. The RBA is comfortable, sort of 2 to 3%. But it's pretty good compared to the early 1990s and the late 80s and the recession that we had to have, and that disaster, getting to double-digit inflation at that time. So we've moved on from there, and you can see that it's pretty much steady as it goes, except for during COVID. Oh, and then this spike here, of course, oops, sorry, my pointer's not working. That's during the GFC. So that's 2008, during the global financial crisis. All right, so what's driving inflation? Well, inflation, I will argue, is being driven mainly by supply side factors, cost push inflation. It's not being driven by mums and dads. It's being driven to an extent by public spending and private spending, and mainly public spending, as I've showed you before, and investment and high net exports. So these things are driving inflation. That's demand pull inflation, but on the supply side, and we talked about the supply side, it's mainly about, do we have enough capital, do we have enough labor stock, and capital things including oil, gas, fertilizer. Fertilizer is another one, urea. That's 20% of the world's fertilizer coming through that strait as well. So watch out for groceries, not just in terms of transport costs, but in terms of literally growing them as well. So that's going to be an issue as well. And these are going to be the supply chain issues. We saw what happened during COVID with resource costs, the supply chain holdups in terms of no transport of goods and services, all of that. You'd go to the shops, yep, I'll buy those headphones, yep, sorry, we haven't got any. So they would display them, but there'd be no stock. So there was nothing to buy, quite literally. And that put prices up. So this is, in terms of what's driving inflation, it's not the demand side, it's the supply side. Quick story, coming out of COVID, the economy was struggling, and the Reserve Bank was hinting at raising interest rates. And I'm like, well, the economy's just gotten back on its feet. Surely the RBA is not going to wipe out the economy and kill us again with an interest rate. Oh, but there's inflation. Yeah, but there's inflation not because of what we're doing, because of what's happening overseas. Supply chain, supply constraints. It's not our spending, it's we can't get access to capital, to labor, and the goods and services themselves are unavailable. So I went to my colleague and I said, what do you reckon? And he turns around to me and looks at me and he goes, did you forget your course, your first year course? I go, what do you mean? He goes, don't you know the RBA is fight inflation first? Oh, no, but they're supposed to be balanced. No, fight inflation first. So we fight inflation no matter what. No matter what, we fight inflation. I went home that day and I fixed my mortgage. I got a small mortgage, I fixed it. And I remember the rate was 2.2%, and I fixed it for 3 years. This is right at the beginning of the interest rate. And the bank was saying, oh, but it's going to be 3.8%. I said, fix it. I said, what can I get for 3 years? 3.8%. Give it to me. They said, you're mad. I said, 1 week later, interest rates started going up. And luckily, we didn't. My household didn't pay the consequence too much of that. And as soon as my fixed rate finished, interest rates started going down again. So I kind of timed it just right. But there is this fight inflation first policy. Forget about short-run effects, long-run effects on supply. The RBA, I don't know if they put up interest rates yet. I haven't been here. I don't know. Has anyone heard? Be 2 o'clock? Yeah, we'll find. They'll put it up and put it up again. And it's a critical thing. It's cost of living. Don't worry about it. Mums and dads struggling. Don't worry about it. People with massive debt. Don't worry about it. Let's keep inflation under control at any cost. It seems to be the way. It seems to be the way. What's the future of interest rates? Well, this is from the RBA speech. In the face of supply shocks that push up prices, we need to think about possible trade-offs. We're 2 goals here, economy versus inflation. That's not what I was taught at university. What I was taught at university is the government's in charge of the economy. The RBA is only interested in inflation. But it turns out the RBA has got a dual function. If a supply disruption is temporary, we won't raise interest rates because that'll only weaken the job market. If the supply shock is likely to have a longer lasting effect and inflation is going to be stronger, then there's grounds for monetary policy to respond. They call it monetary policy, but just interest rate policy. We don't even know how much money we have in the economy. The definition of money keeps changing. So it's actually technically not monetary policy, it's interest rate policy. It's an interest rate target. We'll keep selling money or keep buying money till we get the interest rate where we want it to be. So we call it monetary policy, but it's actually interest rate policy. All right, so that's all I wanted to talk about there. AI and productivity, I'm just mindful of the time. I wanted to talk a little bit about productivity. Supply, we talked about the supply side, how important that is for growth. Getting GDP going, getting income going, despite interest rates rising and killing off demand. Can we still grow the economy in the long term? Can we do better than 2.1%? Can we get back to 4%? That would be lovely if we could do that. Is productivity the way? So is productivity in terms of getting more output, more GDP for the stock that we have and the workers that we have? Can we do that? Is AI going to be the way? So AI is an umbrella term. What does it mean? It's basically a system that uses mathematics and algorithms to analyze patterns in data, to create models and maps, and therefore make predictions. That's how it works. That's what AI is. Is it intuitive? No. Is it creative? No. Does it have the same reasoning as human beings? Absolutely not. It's literally Excel on steroids. I'm sorry, I'm using that as a very, very harsh analogy. But that's what it is. And like Excel, like the internet, like many other things, there's a very famous economist called Varian, and Varian said that technology changes, but economic laws do not. So in terms of, is this the next big internet? How much productivity, how much improvement will we get? But what does it make predictions on? It makes predictions for three things: text, images, and sound. Anything that can be described with numbers: text, images, and sound. And that's what it does. So it's giving computer systems a way of mapping information and making connections between patterns of data. Outputs are only a prediction based on training data. You know the saying, garbage in, garbage out. So that's important. Which may lead to a bias providing unfair or unbalanced output. AI cannot apply instincts or common sense or reasoning or creativity or anything. So important to ask questions and decide how and when we want to use it. When we think of the future of education, rather than coding, for example, maybe we're teaching students courses on how to ask the right questions from AI. Don't worry about the coding. AI will do the coding. It doesn't need to be creative. But you need to be creative. You need to ask the right questions. You need to prompt it to move in the right direction. Maybe this is how we think of productivity education in the future. So with the future of work and productivity in relation to AI, the question becomes, are we going to produce the same GDP with fewer workers, or are we going to produce more GDP with the same amount of workers? Okay, so you see how that works. It's not, everyone's going to lose their job tomorrow. Is it that we're just going to have more GDP? So what's the initial discussion? The initial discussion is if you're a blue-collar worker where outputs are not described by physical changes to the world around us, you're not replaceable. If you're a hairdresser, you're not replaceable. Does your output involve, as a hairdresser, involve text, images, or sound? No? You're fine. You're good to go. Your output is involved with physical changes. If you're a white-collar worker and your output can be described with text, sound, and images, then AI will be gunning for you, technically, as an employee. So process work, potentially replaceable. Tech giant Atlassian lays off 1,600 workers. This is last week. 500 in Australia. This is 12th of March due to the rise of AI. And they said that, we're getting rid of people due to the rise of AI. They had the CEO of the CommBank lately. And he was on Four Corners or ABC, I forget the program. And he's saying, look, and so, are you going to lay off workers? He goes, oh, we're going to move workers to where they need to be. That's code for, we will put workers where we think we can get the most out of AI. And if AI can replace someone, they probably will. I want to leave you all with one final thought. Should the government invest in AI data centers? There's pros and cons against AI, and I'll talk to you about this in terms of data centers. It's being seen as important infrastructure. It's being seen as important as roads, as electricity grids. Strong drivers of economic growth with increase in productivity and efficiencies. And discuss some papers that point to that. Across certain sectors, those that deal with text, images and sound, anything that has numbers-based information, and providing smaller business support, allowing the smaller business, Tim, you mentioned the hairdresser who was able to create a business plan using AI.
Yeah.
So providing that small business support. Governments can maintain sensitive data, so in terms of sovereignty, national sovereignty and privacy, cybersecurity. And having a unified national strategy will help to attract investment in AI data in future as well, AI data centers, and be part of that AI race. They can promote technological advancement, allow for improved resource management and environmental sustainability, throw the economists out, leave it to the AI will do better resource allocation than the economists did. I'm about to lose my job. Luckily, I'm nearly finished. Got a couple more years left. Arguments against government investment in AI. Well, data centers need a lot of energy, a lot of water. They can be used for other areas. So if you haven't got regulatory oversight, social licensing, all of this sort of stuff, it's going to mitigate any effect data centers might have. And that will help them to deal with shortages in water, shortages in power that AI is requiring. High energy and water usage, you're not going to be able to achieve net zero targets. And I look at our economy today and just how dependent we are on fossil energy still. We're so far from net zero, net zero may as well be in Jupiter. If I said Mars, Jupiter. It won't be in your lifetime, my lifetime, or any lifetime. But we will get there eventually. We'll be net zero when there's net zero population on the planet. Picking winners is rapidly evolving market is risky, so don't be picking winners too quickly. And it's my final thought. I'm really, really sorry. I think Tim and Derek I've gone over, but so many exciting things I wanted to discuss today. I thought on Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution didn't happen without the government. Government has a very, very important role because it understands the public good. It understands the third-party effects. It understands the things that the private market doesn't care about and shouldn't. So the government does have a role, and in this case, it allowed for the Industrial Revolution to happen. It provided the legal, the economic, the infrastructural interventions that were necessary to move workers from piecemeal farming and go to new processes, new manufacturing processes, and have the revolution that we had. The technological revolution that we've had very little support from government, and we've been lost in the dark, trying to find our way in the dark. With AI, we're going to see the same thing. Without government support in terms of working our way through it, with the right support, legislation, systems, we're not going to get the most out of AI anytime soon. So that's just a thought I would leave everyone with. We needed the government before, we need them again, and they have their purpose. They have their purpose. Thank you. And any questions?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Thank you, George. I'm going to ask Tim Harding to come up and give a vote of thanks. But I don't think we have enough time for questions now. We've run a bit over time, so if you'd like to ask questions of George, I suggest you do it individually prior to lunch.
Yeah.
So I'll ask Tim to come up and thank George for that wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Terry. And George and I worked together for about 18 years on consulting projects. We did dozens of projects together. We worked very closely until I retired in January 2020. I don't think I've met a more hard-working person than George. We were a great team together. George did the economics of projects and I worked on the content and legislation. Seen another side of you today, George. It's all very interesting, broader aspects, and I particularly enjoyed the part on productivity and AI. I'm a big user of AI, very close to my heart. So a big thank you to you, George, for your most interesting talk today. Great to see you again. And would you like to accept this small token of our esteem?
Thank you, Tim. Thank you very much.